Alright, hi everybody and welcome. I'm Justice Graves. I'm your host of this channel, which is named after me, the Justice Graves channel, and it's happy to see all of you. It has been some time. I actually have no idea how long it's been since I've made a YouTube video, and since then I've gotten new subscribers. So if you've been waiting for a long time and had that notification bell on, congratulations. It has now worked out successfully that you are coming back to watch this channel because I've been busy, and we're going to get into that in just a bit on what I've been busy about and some of the stuff. This is probably going to be a mix of an update video slash, I don't quite know how to sort of word it. It's going to be an update video with some sort of really important commentary at the end and some sort of where my future direction for the channel is going to be as I actually try and get on a regular stream. Not regular streaming schedule, although there'll be streams, but on a regular content creation schedule in the near future. And if I sound weird and if my mouth is moving weird, it's because I bit my lip the other day. Well, not bit my lip, I kind of bit the inside. I'm doing something the other day, and I may have also burned my tongue the other day. So that's that. We're just going to kind of go with it. I have a soda up there that I may drink from time to time just to keep myself going. But that's sort of where we are. But before I really get into it, notice that there's a banner at the bottom of this screen. Please feel free to join my locals community at justicegraves.locals.com. That is a great way to support me in being able to create more content because I do this for free on the internet as a private person. And there are other ways to support me as well. There's another way to support me, which I'll get into as we kind of go through the video. But because it's not like really the main place, but you can also support me by clicking on that subscribe button if you like this content. You can also hit the notification bell to know when I actually post in case I totally don't follow up on my content creation schedule. Then you'll just know when I randomly decide to do stuff if you like it. And I've actually been getting comments recently on my stuff, which is pretty impressive for not doing a video in a while, that people still comment on things from time to time. So what have I been up to? You probably have been curious about. Most of you know that I work for the town of Templeton, and that previously when I started this channel, it was also to sort of use this as a tool to launch a campaign for school committee. I've since was elected to school committee this time last year, then back in September of 2021, resigned, then started work for the town of Templeton. And now we are all the way back to not the school committee this time, but a few months ago, what happened was nobody had pulled paperwork for the local board of assessors. If you don't know what an assessor is, depending on what state you are, they are tax assessors, not tax collectors. They're tax assessors. Or if you're talking about states like Vermont, sometimes they're called listers. For whatever reason, why they're called that, I have no idea. In Massachusetts, we have boards of them that make decisions, so some of them are appointed, some of them are elected. My town does it elected. So we're elected at large from the town at large, and I pulled paperwork and got elected a few weeks ago. And yay, I wouldn't really say congratulations. Ran unopposed, but ran and won nonetheless, and am now on the Board of Assessors for the town of Templeton, and now I am also not excitedly, well, depending on who you ask, some people may be excited that this happened, some people may not be excited that this happened. I'm sort of, it sort of just comes with the position at this point. I'm also the chairman of the Board of Assessors, and I'm also their representative on our local community preservation committee, which I'm not going to get into all the details and all of that because I can't, but that's the 411 on what's been going on. If you have been, or if you had been on my locals at justicegraves.locals.com, so I'm going to kind of push that again, you would have known that all of this was sort of happening in the background. But that's sort of the 411. When you get elected, I've also been busy because you'd think, well, Justice, the election was actually on May 16th. It was Monday, May 16th. And you're thinking, well, why haven't you, can I understand that you were busy with the campaign or learning about stuff and what have you. Well, why haven't you made content recently? Well, also a few weeks ago when I got elected, there is a state regulation where the our Department of Revenue requires that all elected or appointed assessors are qualified to do their jobs, and so you have to take an online sort of course. And I did that, and I'm actually going to... This is actually a combination, this stack of paperwork here that needs to actually get filed, except for this last piece of paper here. There's just an extra piece of paper that's sort of attached to my stuff. These are either individual notes that I wrote for each of the modules in the course that I took, or this is the actual like chapter material that they gave me. So I reviewed all of that and finished that right after I got elected, so now I am a fully qualified assessor. And learned enough about taxation to not want to learn more about taxation. I'm just kidding. I'm probably going to have to learn more as I go through this position, but it is as it is. I still work for the town of Templeton, and the Board of Assessors is an unpaid position, as is being on the Community Preservation Committee. These are unpaid positions to be on. So, just the 411 on that. I'm not going to talk about that stuff on this channel, unless it's like me possibly going up for re-election or something, and, you know, Board of Assessors isn't exactly the most exciting thing to talk about if you're going into a re-election campaign, potentially, or something like that. So I'm probably not going to talk about the Board of Assessors on here. There's also rules about that. So probably not going to talk about a whole lot of what I do on there or anything that is in with my jurisdiction. However, the benefit of being on there, going through, excuse my tongue tie, but going through everything with the course and then, you know, being on the board and stuff for a little while now. It's been, well, it's the 15th when I'm recording this, so tomorrow will be a month when I've been on the board. It'll be my first month through, and I've been through 2 meetings. What will happen is, what will happen, but what I've sort of gained from everything is I have more of an understanding of some of the stuff that I've talked about this channel before when it comes to education and the funding for education, more of a total understanding of what kind of goes on with that, at the level of appropriations and at the level of, you know, your city or town meeting, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later at the end of this video. Other things that I sort of want to bring up, I am just going to plug a few things, just not for my own shameless grifting, but to shamelessly grift for other people as a private resident. So my friend Kieran did some stuff. I've actually been using this pouch as a makeshift pen case. He has some materials on his, what's it called? I think it's a Teespring site. I'm not sure what it is. I'm actually going to put the link for it in the description in this video. But there are these nice cases on there. You can see in the video. I've been using this to hold all of my new pens and stuff. I've recently been starting to use all those notes and stuff that I was writing for the course that I took, because it helps with memory. I was using fountain pens, which I'm holding right here, and learning how to use fountain pens and stuff like that, because, you know, filling on the page, doing that sort of stuff, and doing handwritten notes better than doing typed notes for that kind of stuff. And I do take, when I, you know, learn a new skill, or when I want to learn or take a course or something, whether it was back in college or whether it be now, I like to do things handwritten at first, to sort of, and go through certain exercises so that I can personally remember how it works. So I've been, you know, doing that. But I've been using that case to, you know, hold my pens and stuff, and it's been really sturdy, really good so far, and no complaints with the quality. And the sort of brand name that Kieran is going under, Kieran White, is, the Woke Screen brand. I'm actually going to pull it up here. Woke Screen, which you can go, I'm going to actually link to either his locals community or the actual website itself, Woke Screen, so that you can go and see it for yourself, which also brings you to the site. The other thing that I wanted to mention, because I think it's cool, and I got this and I never got to share it on my channel, is different glass work. So my friend Adrian sent me this in the mail, and she sent it to a few other people, but I just wanted to sort of highlight it because I haven't posted it online at all, on this little Angry Bird. So I want to shout out to Adrian for that. She actually makes glass work on commission under the name of Lamb Stained Glass. I'm actually going to put a link to the Facebook page that her business is on and the website that her business is on in the description. I've also bought from her, and I haven't hung it up just because I think it's too nice to hang up because I'm worried it'll break, a glass dragon. I don't know where I want to put it because I don't want it to like break because I like how the wings look. I don't really know what to do with it. Maybe I'll have someone sort of solder this onto a stand or something because I don't want to hang it up and break it, or maybe it'll just stay in a box. I'm not quite sure. I don't want it to stay in a box. But I have to find some sort of way to put it that is not just hanging up on a thing because I don't feel comfortable doing that with this after I got it. Like, I thought it was cool, and I do think it's cool. I just don't want to destroy it. So, you know, challenges of buying things. You know, if they're nicer than what they seem when you get them, or, you know, you have this vision of what you're going to do with them, and then you get a new vision when you actually see it in person, you know, it can screw up. It doesn't screw up anything, but it just sort of makes things a little bit more interesting. So I am going to put the link for that. That is Wham Stained Glass. I'm also going to probably put something up on the screen so that you can see what the logo is and know where to go for that on this video when I do my editing, because I edit all my videos by myself. So, sort of going through all of that, you kind of got the updates, and you're probably wondering what is the future of this channel going forward a little bit. Oh, and also other personal updates, and I was going to probably do this, and you would know this if you were also in my locals community, but, and some of you may know, have already kind of figured it out because it's on the side of the screen, I was doing videos on Robert's Rules and town meeting time, and I stopped that last summer because I got busy, and I was focusing on other things like what was going on with the ARPA funds, etc. But I have recently started, and I'm taking notes and stuff on it. I am going to go and try and take the membership exam for the National Association of Parliamentarians. You know, basically a group that talks about how to run meetings, focuses on being very particular about, you know, the types of skill sets that you would have for like bylaw creation for an organization or for maintaining order at a meeting, etc. So I have been studying Robert's Rules of Order. I actually, like, I have the book, but I decided to sort of go through this way first. So I am studying Robert's Rules of Order newly revised in brief, the 3rd edition, which you can see here. I have the spiral copy from the National Association's website, National Association of Parliamentarians website, and I've been studying this a little bit. Haven't had a super amount of time. I've been kind of taking detailed notes. I know how to run a meeting, but I want to know all the specifics of what, you know, is typically or formally understood as being the proper way to run a meeting. So that way I understand the back of my mind how things are going and, you know, can sort of transition between formal and informal sort of proceedings when I need to, depending on the size and scope of what's going on. So, and also to be support so that people who have questions about that sort of stuff can use me as a reference or can ask me questions and I can give them sort of my off-the-hip diagnostics on it. So that's sort of what I'm doing, and that's also going to take up some of my time as well. But that shouldn't take up as much of the time as focusing on actually being DOR compliant and getting that assessor's course done, that Introduction to Assessment Administration. So that's all said and good. So in the future, I actually do plan on, after I'm done Ronar in brief, to do some videos on Ronar. I'll do the ones in brief to just sort of go through overviews of how meetings and stuff work. I know I've been getting comments recently that people want me to do that. Even though I haven't been posting videos for a long time, people want me to make that content. So I am going to give you that content. I am also going to focus on being lesser known, and I have to be very careful because of copyright. Town meeting time, it is less widely discussed in the proceedings for that, so I have to be very careful with how I sort of present that, but I will present it sort of in the way that it does through its own sections, and that is a handbook on parliamentary law that dictates how a lot of towns in Massachusetts run their town meetings. And town meetings actually goes into the meat of what this video is going to be about, which is what, besides the Ronar and the town meeting time stuff, what is the other future of this channel going to be? I am going to focus back on what's going on with the government in education and with the woke stuff going on. I was doing that before. I was a part of my campaign. I also focused on other substantive material, but I am going to get back into that. And I am going to do it in a little bit of a different format, because through my experiences the last few months and learning the new things that I have, whether it be through different things that I've had to do, personally, and, whether it be elected or whether it just be on my normal job or etc., or just through normal research and stuff that I've done, I'm going to sort of take a different approach to some of this. Hopefully, it's still going to be in my typical style, so if you like my style, don't worry about it. And I'm going to try and sort of give you the 411 as much as I can, with sort of the layers of logic that kind of go on and sort of educate you on the situation. And one of the case studies that I'm going to try and do in order to overview some of what's going on and some of the misunderstandings that I think people aren't seeing with regards to how to sort of fight back on this wokeism, or to how to sort of go back on all of this really divisive and non-productive material that is coming into the woodworks through the Biden administration and other entities, is I'm going to use the state of New Hampshire, because it is just a nexus for quote-unquote progress on the fight on woke, when truly it is the biggest dumpster fire, and that is my professional opinion of what's going on in the entire state, is that it is a dumpster fire of no progress is being made. Honestly, if we're being completely honest, talking about, some of you know that I live in Massachusetts. I've kind of mentioned this already, but I live in Massachusetts if you didn't know that. You may wonder, well, why aren't you focusing on Massachusetts? Well, Massachusetts is woke. There's no other way to sort of put this. It's a state that has a lot of regulation on almost everything. It is not. It's. You know what you're getting when you kind of get into this state. You know that it's not going to be a walk in the park. There's a lot of layers of bureaucracy that sort of prevent movement from going forward. There's a lot of strong and difficult personalities that are entrenched and know how to use the rules in an effective way at the state level, that nothing, if they don't want to enforce something, it's not getting enforced. You pass a law that's supposed to protect people, and they have this weird idea. You pass a law that's supposed to enhance rights. You're dealing with, multiple elected or appointed officials who just are going to go do their own thing regardless of what anyone says. This state, thinks of itself as very progressive, and it acts as one would think New York, it isn't too different from New York in certain respects. It's just a little less crazy. Just a little bit, because we have a lot of rural communities. I mean, New York does as well, but because we don't have the amount of people that New York has, the crazy that you sort of see, you see it multiplied over there just because there's more of a hotbed for it versus here. But it is here. And Boston's a great example. That stuff is covered so widely and so nationally, it's almost pointless to talk about it, because like I said, I want to educate you, right? So if I'm telling you all about what the Daily Wire is talking about, or what, James Lindsay is talking about on the internet, Dr. James Lindsay and stuff, or what other people like Erica Sanzi and Nicole Solis are talking about. They're talking about stuff that's being elevated to the highest degree. New Hampshire, while it was being elevated because it's got a lot of issues, there's been a lot of, ignoring going on over there. But there has been a lot of activity that I really need to sort of demonstrate to you what happens when a state is woke, but it really doesn't, but it puts its forward outward identity as being sort of this rebellious, non-compliant area that is moving the needle. One of the best ways that I can sort of show you what's going on in New Hampshire besides, I could talk individual examples, but that's kind of no different than what happens in Massachusetts when we're talking about Lowell High School, or when we're talking about places like, I want to say it's Needham High School, or the Needham School District. Those places that are just a total mess, or maybe it's Natick. I can't remember what other places that James Lindsay sort of hits on and some other people sort of talk about, or the Boston Public Schools. I could talk about those specific instances, but if you're at my channel and you're sort of looking for certain things, I would hope that you have I'm going to assume that my audience is intelligent enough to understand what's on the line. So I am not going to reiterate what wokeism is, giving you those examples, because I don't think that's going to help you if you're on my channel because of what you're looking for. And because there are other channels that I can point to that do it and that would do it better, because that's not my style. But what I am going to be able to do is talk to you about what is going on, what policies are being implemented, and how does the money move, and what rules and regulations are in effect that sort of dictate how that's going to get spliced up, or split up, or divvied up, however that's kind of going, and to sort of go through and be able to read these rules and find these regulations and post them for you so that you can be informed and nuanced enough in a conversation so that you really know what's going on when you're talking with your elected officials, or when you're seeing a gubernatorial candidate on stage, so that you're not fooled with what's really going on. That is more universal and I think helpful for my audience, and I think for people at large who may be attracted to this channel, than it would be for me to talk about what Manchester Schools is doing, what Keene State is. Now I'm going to talk about what they're doing to sort of highlight what is being hidden. It's just not going to be the main focus of any of this. And it's not going to be the large chunk of my content, if at all. So I just want to set that baseline right now. And while we're talking about gubernatorial candidates, that's sort of the way in the next video that I'm going to do that I'm going to sort of use to frame out what's happening. Because what the statewide candidates are doing for their statewide elections, what they're saying and what they're not saying, is very indicative of the problem over there right now. Or up there, because I'm only 20 miles south. The state isn't talking about certain things or really addressing certain issues that we have talked about on this channel, specifically with ARPA funds, and specifically in other respects with other stuff that's going on that's been published nationally that's sort of been forgotten now. We're talking about Manchester, we're talking about other things. And all that being said, I think that's a good way, especially going into the midterms, to communicate with you what's going on. I am going to, in this next video, which is going to be about the gubernatorial candidates and their policy points and what that actually translates into. It's going to be a very long video because I'm going to go through what the GOP is doing, the Democrats are doing, and what the Libertarians are doing, because Libertarians in New Hampshire are a large enough portion that you have to pay attention to them in the State House, period. Whether they are labeled as Libertarians or whether they are Republicans with libertarian principles that are acting within the state legislature. Because they are listening to the talking points that that party is making. And we got to talk about that. So that's what's going to happen in the next video. But for today's video, to sort of go into an analysis for the rest of it, because I do kind of want to give you some content instead of just updates and sort of just a direction for what's going forward, I'm going to talk about one of the talking points of one of the gubernatorial candidates. The other reason why it's so useful to sort of talk about New Hampshire right now is that just last Friday was the deadline for submitting signatures. Submitting the signature petitions to be on the ballot. So we're going to find out in a few weeks or whatever who made the cut and who didn't to be on the ballot in New Hampshire. I don't suspect any surprises. People who have declared, excuse my tongue tie, people who have declared to be on the ballot are probably going to get on. So it's going to get really interesting. And then you're going to see the primary elections go through, and then you're going to see the general election. And we'll sort of go through that. What we are going to talk about is, for the rest of the analysis on this video, is what one specific policy is that has been brought to the forefront. There's certain places that have sort of done things with this, but I don't think they understand the larger picture, and it is related to what I understood when I was on school committee, and information that I think is really important to convey out to you that I can now since I'm not on school committee and I'm not dealing with how to budget that or having any fiduciary responsibility with regards to that. So I'm not going to say which party or which candidate has put this forward, but there is a policy position, very strong policy position, that is stating that a candidate is stating that says that they want to make property taxes optional because 2/3 of all property taxes go towards public schools in New Hampshire. There is a lot with that statement. And I don't even think I'm really paraphrasing that. That is, I think, the complete policy that has been put forward. There's a lot to unpack in that statement, whether we're talking about the nuances of how that sort of operates with property taxes. I can't get into how that's done, but what I can sort of get into is what affects it and what does the property tax actually fund, which I think is something people don't understand. And New Hampshire is very similar to Massachusetts. There's also the other side of it, which I just talked about with appropriation, which kind of goes to the later half of that sentence, which is the justification because of the 2/3 of all property taxes. So let's kind of go with let's kind of start with the beginning of that sentence. Let me just sort of analyze and break that down for what that statement sort of does. And I'm not going to tell you whether I support it or not in this video, because that's got to kind of be on you. I am going to get more into what policy positions I support from the candidates in the video that I do on the whole thing, but not in this one. I just sort of want to analyze that statement and give you some information on that topic. So, most of the money that supports your local towns or cities comes from property taxes. That is a fact, almost universal fact that most people know. It's posted on every website. It's posted on every town website. That is how most of your money is that is how you get most of your money for that stuff. Now notice what I said is most of your town's budget or your city's budget is done through property taxes, if not almost exclusively. There's other things that support that. I don't want to get into that. But property taxes are going to make up well over 60, 70, 80% of what's going to supply that budget for your town or city. Your town or city budgets include in it your school budget. If you're in a regional school district like what I'm in by being in Templeton, your property taxes still pay for that. It's just that it's a separate budget that you get to vote on. Go figure. It's not much different. How it gets voted on is in two ways. Either town meeting, if you're in a town, and there's different types of town meeting. I'm just going to talk about open town meeting today, and at the city council. Most people know how the city council works. The budget gets presented, a majority vote, I believe it's a majority vote of the city councilors sets what the appropriation is or sets what the budget is. What's important to understand is that, first of all, it is not a tax if it's optional. Now, yes, I understand that this is a linguistic feature that's being done in that statement or that policy statement so you can understand what is it that they're making optional. But when you make something like that optional, that means that it's not a tax anymore. It's more like a donation. So you're going to do just a free donation to your town, which means you can do anything from a cent to $1 million if you can afford it. Most people aren't going to do that. So that is something to sort of keep in mind when you're thinking about that policy position. What you also got to think about is, like I just said, your school budget is voted on with your town's budget. So ultimately, the people who budget and the people who appropriate that budget are responsible for how much money goes to the school district. It is not your tax collector's responsibility to determine that. It isn't the people who commit that tax onto you. It is the people who control the money, or not control the money, but who determine what the budget is and what their needs are, and the appropriating authority. In a city, it is the city council. We just talked about that. It's a majority vote of the city councilors. In town, it's town meeting. It's a majority vote of the townspeople, or whatever sort of variation style that you legally have, whether we're talking about New Hampshire or Massachusetts. New Hampshire has some of the same ways that town meeting is done. There's an open town meeting where anybody can show up. There's the representative versions as well. So this is an easy analogy between the two states, and I understand it very well looking at New Hampshire rules and law, that New Hampshire residents set what they want to pay for the school district. They show up, they vote, that's what it is. Now there's a number that's put out there for the meeting that's suggested by the school committee, but ultimately the voters decide on that. What is interesting about this statement in its entirety about the 2/3 and the property tax is it assumes that, one, people don't understand that, yes, there's a relationship between the two, but it's not a direct relationship. And believing that getting rid of one thing eliminates the problems on the other side, or whatever rules are on the other side. So, and I'm trying to explain this in the right way to sort of just kind of get my flow going. But ultimately, where this sort of falls flat, I'm going to kind of just give it away right now. I don't think it's the best platform position, and I think it has some inherent dishonesties in it. I think from a political standpoint, it makes sense to say something like that. But where there are others with issues with it, I'm going to have to get into detail like next week about this. What is sort of interesting about that policy position is it assumes there's a direct relationship. There isn't. There's an indirect relationship. And it assumes that when you get rid of one, the need disappears. One of the other things about there's a unique thing about school budgets. There's also a unique thing about snow and ice budgets that's sort of similar, but it's not completely, but we'll just talk about school budgets. Most states have minimum spending laws, which means that based on certain parameters in your town, you have to pay a minimum amount to your school district or appropriate a budget of a certain minimum threshold. You don't, otherwise the state board comes in or the state Department of Education comes in and they can sort of make that decision for you if you fail to do that. Or they can cite you in different things, and then the state starts to get involved, and it's kind of icky, and, you know, it's not such a good situation. My town was almost in a situation where the state had to go in because there was a dispute about a budget. Not that we weren't spending enough, but that there was a debate about whether we should do the minimum or we should go up or, you know, what have you. Typically in Massachusetts, we call it minimum school spending. So I'm going to call it minimum school spending because I don't know what New Hampshire's rules are. I don't know if there is a minimum school spending amount that's required. But you have to spend a certain amount. It's based on how many kids you have. It's based on other factors. But having, you know, how many kids are in the district or how many potential kids are in the district is a big point. Now, how do you determine how many kids are potentially in the district? You do it based on how many kids are in the town or how many people are in the district because, and there's another fact in this whole situation, compulsory education is a fact of life in almost all 50 states. It is the rule, not the exception. Kids have to go to school. They have to be put into a public school system before they can get put into another system, or if they're about to be entered, if they're of age to be entered into a public school system, there has to be documentation put in immediately so that way they can be put into homeschool or into a private school. But public school is the rule, not the exception. What the policy position of getting rid of the property tax because of the fact that they pay so much to schools is, even if you get rid of the funding source, the state still says, this is what you must do. You have not eliminated the fact that the state is going to come in and make you do something that you don't want to do when you're trying to eliminate stuff on the other end of it. Now, this person is running for governor. They're going to try and use their leverage to make the state get rid of the property tax. The other side that's really fascinating about this is on one of the posts, or in one of the policy positions they put out, they say, and it's really interesting that they put this, that that getting rid of that funding source, the state can make up that money in other ways. So instead of you paying to live on your property, they're going to take that money someplace else. So what was the point of that exercise? You've gotten rid of one funding source, but now you're going to provide another one with the same amount of money or more. That's what it sounds like to me. That's not necessarily what the person is conveying. I don't want to over-paraphrase or put words in people's mouth. But that is important when you're messaging or trying to be logically consistent in messaging, which a lot of political messaging is not logically consistent, unfortunately, because a lot of people get bad information on what they should be saying and what they shouldn't be saying. I'm going to take a drink just now. But yeah, it's, you know, that's something that we got to talk about. That's not really going so great in terms of the messaging. You know, it's almost like saying, I'm going to give you this quote-unquote relief, and then I'm going to take it all away from you in this other avenue. It just doesn't make sense. And the other sources of income that you could take it from are probably going to hurt people worse. I can't really go into complete how does that sort of break down and what have you, but that's not so good. So what I'm trying to convey, and hopefully you follow the logic through this, is that you can get rid of where the money is coming from, whether it be grants or what have you. This kind of applies to everything. You know, it's not about, this isn't about taxation. This is about, you're getting rid of a funding source, whether it be, you know, because SEL and stuff is funded through grants a lot of times, or through federal dollars that are coming from, you know, sometimes it's from other forms of taxation or other forms of collection. Or there's people donating money and stuff. You're talking about revenue from donations and other sources, or from companies and stuff, in some cases, like in Oklahoma, that are going into this situation with school districts. And you're saying, we're going to cut off the funding, but you're not going to get rid of the regulation that demands that those things are funded that way, or that demands that those things are funded, period. So you're cutting off one avenue, but you are not eliminating the whole situation, or you're not addressing all of it. You know, this, you know, maybe it's more controversial to go this way, but a more logical and principled way of dealing with this situation would be to say, kids are being indoctrinated in these public schools because they're forced to go there. Compulsory education should be eliminated. That's principled. That's concise. And it deals with the problem directly. It says that shouldn't be happening. Get rid of that. Just getting rid of funding sources doesn't always get rid of the problem. And when you're indicating that you're going to use other funding sources to support the regulation already in place, it's just a shuffling game. You're just taking money that you would have gotten here, and you're taking it and over pumping up another category, and then you're just going to push it over. I mean, it's not, you know, it's like being in a business. Like if you decide that, you know, you still want to make the same amount of revenue every year, but instead you start to do advertising on your better selling product because it's more appetizing compared to the product that is, you know, same old, it's old, it's worn, nobody kind of wants it anymore, nobody's interested in it, so you just kind of cast it aside and get rid of it, and you make that executive decision. It looks like you're being progressive, but really you're just, I mean, you're quote-unquote moving into the future with your product line, but really you've just shuffled, you know, your customer base's money around from throwing it at that one product to throwing it at this next product. So that is something to sort of pay attention to, that it's actually no different than that. You know, it's no different than a business decision where you still want the same corporate bottom line number, but you invest that in a different category of your product lines, or in a different product line altogether, or for an acquisition, what have you. You know, again, this isn't about taxation. This is about policy. Are you getting the appropriate money you should be getting? You know, blah, blah, blah. Back up for a minute. This is about policy. You got to deal with the problem and the mechanisms that force things to happen versus, you know, just sort of cutting off funding sources. The other thing that's really has not, and this is, a New Hampshire town tried this, and I did see an article on this, and I'm probably going to have to bring this up, where they tried to get rid of, I think, all forms of, like, you know, basically just tried to be like a homestead community, kind of like a township. And what happened was, again, kind of going back to earlier to what I said, those funds that you're getting from taxpayers fund your services like fire and EMS, or that fund things like your local libraries, or that patch up your roads. And in that town that tried to just not appropriate anything or not have any town budget at all, their bridges and stuff had issues. They did not have any emergency services, and people were pretty upset. Regardless of how you feel about certain things, a lot of people want certain services that they are willing to pay for, whether it be one way or the other. That is, someone's going to come and save you when you're in danger, so that's going to be emergency services such as paramedics and fire, and they want to be able to have access to information, so they're going to want some type of cable and some type of way to get that cable, whether it be some type of commission or otherwise, and they're going to want some way to get access to literature and stuff. And if that's not coming from businesses like bookstores, they're going to want to be able to go to a library, and they're going to want to be able to go into archives and get information for research purposes. So, for stuff that's not already ported online. Libraries also house servers to have their stuff online. So if you get rid of the libraries, you're also getting rid of that. Or if you're getting rid of the funding sources for those libraries, you're also getting rid of that. So, and that all gets bundled in with property. You know, you can't get rid of, I'm not saying you can't, but what's sort of dangerous about this situation is you are now, if you were just talking about, and this is sort of my experience from being on school committee, if you were just talking about, what am I thinking of? If you're just talking about a school district and trying to fight the school budget or whatever, and its appropriation and lowering its appropriation and saying your school budget needs to be halved or whatever, you're gonna get a lot more support on your side. If you're trying to go after the whole shebang, you're just like, nope, don't want anything. I'm not talking about the school. You can go after the whole school as much as you want. You're gonna get a lot of support for that these days. Or a lot more than you would in the past. But if you try and go after what's going to affect other categories of things, the school district's got more power now. They can go walk around and say, hey, you people over there, you firefighters, you people over there, oh, you paramedics and stuff, these people over there who want to hurt us, they're going after you now. And that's actually pretty realistic. Because that's exactly what's happening. They're going after you now. So if you want to serve your community still, or if you still want to have your jobs, you got to support us. And it only furthers the divide. It makes things more tribalistic. And it's not, so, you know, if you actually succeeded on a campaign like that, and you were about to institute that, you would see huge whiplash. Because, as I said earlier, and I didn't say it quite like this, but now I'm sort of going full circle, and I'm going to have more to sort of, iron this out a little bit more professionally next week. The foundation of how your towns and city runs is that property tax. If it's not there, and all you're saying is you're going to find other ways of funding it, that is going to freak, people like to go with the devil they know versus the devil that they don't know. And if you're it is really a game of risk and reward. The schools have been failing people, and there's a lot of data to support that. So when you go after the school districts for what they're not doing appropriately, and you're trying to convince these parents that they got to pull their kids out and do homeschooling, there's a lot to support that. There's a lot of mechanisms to support that, and there's a lot of money that flows through education anyway, and there's a lot of materials that are available both online and in person. So that's a much more easier end-sum game to go towards if you're just focusing on the rules and regulations that affect that. When you cross-contaminate, and I say that because it is a contamination, or you cross over into other categories of things that locally aren't woke. Like, your paramedics locally probably aren't woke, or your firefighters. They're going to rush into whatever building because these people, actually most of them believe in their higher calling. So now you're putting those people who would normally be on your side of the argument that the schools are doing wrong, and that the schools are not teaching the kids, and that the schools are a problem, and that this compulsory education thing isn't working. You would normally get those people on your side. They're now inherently going to be against you because you have lumped their situation in with the school districts. Inherently, when you go after something, it's a big, big chunk to take off. Now, I know some people are going to say, for somebody, if that person's intentions are to go after all taxation, well, then it is a principled argument to go after that. Okay. Well, what's also principled is understanding there's a lot of other stuff that's on, it's sort of hard to measure up, right? Like, I'm trying to sort of explain this on the fly here. But when it comes to that type of argumentation, yes, it is the very principled argument, but is it when you do something like that, there is a sense of objective realism that comes into effect. If you are so devout to that principled argument that you alienate other people who you could normally get to your side over time, you may be principled, but you have done no activism, and you have successfully managed to alienate every person that you could have gotten onto your side over a period of 5 or 10 years. You've done nothing to advance your cause, and all you've done is become such a devotee to what you are trying to preach, which you may think is right. This kind of goes for all principled people who are, depending on what category you are and what the principled argument is for that thing. In this case, we're just talking about the property tax, unfortunately. That you run the risk of not only not moving your vision forward, you run the risk of it regressing backwards and it getting worse. Because of, like I said, that whiplash effect. You threaten everybody, or you threaten just the right things in the right places, which is essentially what this is. People aren't just going to go work for free as paramedics or firefighters. That's unrealistic, and there's not other ways of funding these. These don't come from funding from the state government. This comes from the localities themselves. When you risk that, you are now in a situation like what that local New Hampshire place was experiencing. Not only were their roads and bridges completely, trashed, didn't have any emergency services. And that is something that people need to keep in mind. Now, some people will say, well, if you're trying to find a hybrid model or to focus on the situation like, you gotta vote differently at town meeting, or you gotta vote for different people on your city council, what you're doing is just sort of compromising. And I want to be very clear about compromise. Compromise is very important. Negotiating is very important. Whether you like it or not. If you are such a devout, principled person that you don't want to negotiate, you're going to lose in life. You're going to just lose. One of the reasons why the woke win so well is because they compromise, but they know how to. And every time that a compromise is made with the other side, you'll notice, and the gun reform stuff going on is actually a really great example of this, they don't lose anything. They're upset that they don't get all of what they want. But they don't lose a single thing. They march forward with more control than they did before the previous arrangement. When you're trying to be an activist in that respect of getting your principled position across to people, you gotta look at all the strengths and weaknesses of what you're getting into, not just based on objective reality, but based on the subjective wills of the groups you're trying to appeal to. I know that may be a controversial statement for some of you who know that I am very much, in the engineering sciences. I like that objective realism that, you see it, you feel it, you know what it is. And it does what it says it does. It is what it is. And, there's no question about what's going on. But people are different. And you gotta think like people. You gotta think like the voters in these situations. And I've had to think like the voters a few times because running in a few elections and dealing with the public helps you with that. Helps you get into that mindset. Now, you can also get into that mindset of thinking like the voters and also thinking about how to manipulate them. But when you're talking about how to build compromise, you gotta think about how do you compromise that you move forward and that you don't compromise anything else. That's sort of the benchmark. When you're in a compromise or when you're going into a compromise, you push forward. You want to hit a certain point where everything's sort of even-steven, and then you want to make sure that you win. You want to get some. You don't want to if you're going to give up something, it's got to be something that you know for a fact isn't going to hurt your positioning at all, and that doesn't move the needle in the other direction. And that's what the woke do every time. When it comes to gun reform, when it comes to what happens in education, they know how to use a situation or a crisis or the poor political platforming of other candidates to, unfortunately, push what they want along in the way that they want it. And they don't lose any ground. They're upset that they don't gain more ground, but that's something you're really going to think about. So you can be as principled as possible. Your principled position can be, I don't want to fund anything in my town. Okay, fine. How is putting yourself versus everybody advancing anything? It's not doing anything. It's the same way that I also talk with people about school committees and stuff. You being against everything is not, you may not like what's going on, but some stuff you gotta realize is totally out of your control and is happening. But when it comes to the big stuff that's going on, or even some of the small things, you gotta get that other side to compromise on their authority so you can push them out of that. Push them out of that realm or out of that interference with the child's life that you don't want them in. But if you're just against everything that goes on, you're not going to win or convince anybody of anything. People are just going to look at you not as a shake-up candidate or not as a shake-up person who's elected. They're going to look at you as a problem. That's a big perception is in order to win the hearts and minds of others, you have to look reasonable. Okay, that's not an uncompromising thing to be. You don't have to like what the other person says. And again, you can be as principled as you want on whatever category or topic you're talking about. You cannot put yourself in a situation where you're just losing all the time. You're just losing all of the time isn't going to help your cause. Now, you shouldn't vote for things that are blatantly bad. Don't vote on the compromises that the woke give you. You got to put it on your terms and push it onto the other side. Like, for example, with gun reform, there should be, this is just my opinion, there shouldn't be what's going on right now. But if you wanted to do gun reform on the Republican side, you want to know what would be good gun reform? Eliminate, personally, I think that red flag laws can be easily abused. So I would say we're going to stick with the laws that we have and then try and compromise that, well, we want everyone to be able to own anything that they want, but we can't get there. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this proposal forward where we just get rid of the incentives for red flag laws. There's nothing else. We stand firm. We don't vote for other things. We just push that position forward. We think of the we do the pros and cons analysis. We sort of push our political stuff forward, and then we kind of get that through to the finish line. That's what the woke do. They know that their ideas have pros and cons. They know that they do. They just create these moral dynamics and capitalize on these moral situations to make sure that what they want gets across over the finish line a lot faster than whatever Republicans want. And I'm not a big fan of the Republicans, don't get me wrong. I'm just sort of using that as a good example of, or at least a semi-decent example. It's not a well thought out example. I'm just sort of doing this on the fly. But I've been recording for almost an hour. I want to go to bed. But, that is sort of what I wanted to get through today with regards to sort of the preview. It's going to be a long video when I actually record this. It's probably going to have to be broken up into chunks, so you're going to see me at different sort of segments and probably different clothes or whatever, because I have to figure out how I'm going to do this with each of the parties and what their platforms are for their gubernatorial candidates and what that's kind of looking like and how that's shaping up. That's just one of the categories of things. There's another one where it talks about, there's always the Republican one about, quote unquote, lowering taxes, or there's always the other thing about, school transparency or whatever. And there's a lot to talk about with regards to that. And also what candidates and stuff they would reappoint to, like, different commissioner positions. That is another point we got to bring up next week on what's going on in New Hampshire. That's sort of the baseline on my thoughts on that position, on the whole, school funding thing with the appropriation and the town meeting stuff in the forefront on how that actually sort of works. Which the only people who have control over that are the budgetary authorities and the voters. Whether it be the city council vote, people who vote on the city council, or whether it be town meeting voters or town meeting reps or the actual voters. If it's an open town meeting, anybody can show up and vote. I mean, that's really who's in control. Other things, that doesn't quite address how you got there or the authoritarianism that supported that. Getting rid of the source of how things work doesn't get rid of the fact that you still have those rules on the books, and there are still enforcement agencies that are being funded that are gonna make these towns and cities somehow do that. And how that's gonna look and how that's gonna be isn't gonna be pretty, depending on the situation. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. Thank you for your time today with listening to this channel. Hopefully that wasn't too long-winded, just sort of me just trying to get back into things. Ugh, it's weird being on YouTube again. And thank you for your time. Thank you, and I appreciate it. Make sure, as the banner has been going down this whole time, to like, share, and subscribe to this channel, to go and support me on my on my locals community at justicegraves.locals.com. That is justicegraves.locals.com. Another thing that you can do to help me, and this was something that I mentioned earlier but I didn't bring up completely, is you can support me by also supporting some of the other work that I do. I also am a programmer. I actually got a new MacBook because I'm trying to finish programming I got a MacBook. I've never had a Mac or whatever before in my life. I always have Windows or Linux devices. I'm trying to finish. I've done an app. A few I launched like back, I think, in January or February. It's called the Fast Track app. You can check it out. You can buy it on the Google Play Store. I'm going to put a link for it down in the description. It's only on the Google Play Store right now. I'm trying to work up to get it fun to put it onto the Apple Play Store. Not the Apple Play Store, the Apple Store or the Apple App Store, which I am going to do. That's on my list of things for the summer to sort of finish and finalize completely and be done with that whole project. If you can check it out. You can see if you look it for yourself. I've done a video on what it is on this channel. If you want to check that out, I'm going to link that in the description as well. And that is also a really good way to fund something that I've actually worked on and to sort of check out. It is not the most technically, aesthetically pleasing thing that I've ever made. Actually, it probably is the most aesthetically pleasing thing that I've ever made because I'm not a graphic artist at all. Don't pretend that I am for 1 minute. But it is something that you can do that is interesting, that is something that I'm passionate about with regards to track and field and cross country, that if you do support it, you're helping me with other avenues of things that I can also talk about on the channel and keep you interested and varied with my content. So that's my big pitch for how you can support me. Again, like, share, and subscribe. Hit that little notification bell. And see you soon. I really appreciate all of you who watched this video and all of you who will watch this video. And I hope you have a great rest of your day whenever you are watching this. Thank you, and God bless. So bad at smiling at the camera. So bad.